The European Union is changing. Today we're going to analyze the situation in several EU countries and how current policies have changed the trajectory of the European Union, possibly forever. We're going to break down the current situation and facts that will blow your mind. Let's start with Greece, a country that has been undergoing economic turmoil since the last financial crisis in 2009. A friend of mine who is from Athens, Greece, shared her personal experience living and working in Greece. She is in the therapeutic industry, working 50 hours a week just to make ends meet. But despite all her hard work, there's little to no money left for savings. Let's not even talk about going on vacations or affording a nicer car. All these things are impossible for her during this time. Like so many others, the past health crisis completely wiped out her savings and forced her into taking a line of credit, something she's still paying off today. To make matters even worse, my friend had to close her previous business because of very strict government restrictions during the past crisis. So now she's working in a different field, yet she's still licking her wounds from the past crisis. She wrote me a message and I'm going to read it to you now. And it's quite concerning, it's saddening, but let's get started with what she had to say. She says, renting an apartment here isn't easy either. For a basic 1 to 2 bedroom apartment, you will pay anywhere between 500 to 600 euros a month. She says, and remember, that is without utilities. Now, I have personally verified this information. If you want to rent an apartment in Athens, Greece, or in Piraeus, or Kallithea, or any of the surrounding cities, you have to pay at least 500 euros a month. If you want something that's okay, it's nothing fancy, oftentimes 500 to 600 euros a month won't get you an apartment with modern furniture. It's a dated apartment. She says, to put things in perspective, many people in Greece don't earn more than 1,000 euros a month. This means that over 50% of their salary goes directly to rent. Imagine this. Here's your salary. It's just 1,000 euros a month. Now landlords ask you for 500 to 600 euros a month for rent, and that's without utilities. If you add utilities on top, and trust me, you have pretty high electricity costs in Greece, especially during the summertime, because Athens, Greece is probably one of the hottest cities in whole Europe. And she makes this point that over 50% of her salary goes directly to rent. And this is like impossible if you want to save money when you spend 50% or more of your monthly net income on rent. That's the beginning of the end, because you have utilities, insurance, food, other things you need, clothing, whatever it may be. There's no chance that any person can save any money with this kind of budget and spending 500 to 600 euros a month on rent. It's impossible. And let's get real, the majority of Greek, they don't earn anywhere near 2,000 euros a month. A lot of them have to be satisfied with 900 euros to 1,400 euros a month. And of course, if you factor in a family, children, it makes things even worse. She says, now let's compare this to the United States, where in most cases you can't even rent an apartment unless your monthly income is at least 2.5 times to 3 times the rent. This is true in the event that you want to rent an apartment in the United States of America, and typically it doesn't really matter where you want to rent the apartment in the territory of the US. The majority of landlords or companies you work with, they want to see proof of income. They'd ask you for your bank statements, your salary slips, and oftentimes they mention before they even let you view the apartment or during the viewing that say, hey, in order for you to rent an apartment from our company, we want to see that you make at least 2.5 times the monthly rent. That's what they want to see. Some of them actually ask for 3 times the monthly rent. This standardized approach has made it a lot more difficult for middle-class Americans to rent in the United States these days. She goes on, she says, but in Greece, many people struggle to meet just the basic housing costs. This is true, and due to the increasing housing costs and just just the low median salary in Greece, what a lot of Greek people would do is they would rent a room in an apartment. So they would share an apartment with multiple people. It's the only way that they can afford a life. There's no way that you can rent an apartment if 50% of your monthly rent, at the very minimum 50% of your monthly rent, is gone. She also makes a very important statement here about how the Greek government now allows Greek citizens to work more hours to make ends meet. Here's what she says. She says, in a bid to boost economic growth, Greece recently introduced a 6-day working week for certain industries. And this is true. The 6-day work week is becoming the normalized way of life here. Now, to be fair, not every person engages in more hours. They just don't want to deal with it. And in the event that you have spent time on the Mediterranean, you know how the Mediterranean mentality works. People aren't born here to work 50 to 60 hours a week. People who live here, people like the natives of the Mediterranean countries, they love life. They want to work few hours and have more quality of life. But given the current economic turmoil that so many Mediterranean countries are in, they have to work more hours just to make ends meet. There's no other way around it. She says this new legislation, which came into effect in July 2024, allows employees to work up to 48 hours a week. And guess what? Many Greek people actually work a lot more than 48 hours a week. It is just not on the books. She goes on, she says, but despite working longer hours, the majority of Greek people can no longer afford a middle-class lifestyle. Many Athenians dream of taking a simple 2-week vacation to one of Greece's beautiful islands. But even that is becoming a distant dream. So true. I had spoken to so many Athenians during my time in Athens, Greece this year who confirmed it's just impossible for them to take a 1 or 2 week vacation to one of Greece's most beautiful islands. They just don't have the finances to do so. What do they do instead? Maybe they spend more time in the city, right? They stay at home, they go out to eat a few times, but just going on a vacation and renting an Airbnb. And let's not even talk about staying at an all-inclusive hotel, something that has become nearly impossible for the majority of Greek people. Some still make it work. They, get into debt, which is definitely not recommended. But what can you do if you're struggling this much economically? Sometimes you want to also have some relief, correct? And just to be clear, when you spend time in Athens, Greece, you see exactly why this is the case. Just walking down the streets of Athens, Greece, you can see why. Do you know how many Greek drive a car that's 20 years or older? New cars are extremely rare. Of course, there are fancier neighborhoods where the wealthier people live who can afford the newer cars. You even see Teslas in Athens, Greece. But still, the economy is struggling and people are struggling as well. And the reality is that many Greeks are driving 20-year-old cars and can't even afford basic repairs these days. It's a matter of fact. Just walk down the streets of Athens, Greece, and you will see that what I'm telling you is 100% correct. The infrastructure is also crumbling in Athens, Greece. Roads haven't been fixed in decades. And then there's the stray animal issue, a problem the government seems to ignore. I have personally attempted to rescue a stray cat, brought her to one of the nearest veterinarian hospitals, just to get the bad news that there's nothing that can be done to save the cat's life. Needless to say, I had to pay the bill that was issued by the veterinarian, and unfortunately the cat didn't make it. We came too late, but at least we tried. Let's get real. Stray animals are dying on the streets of Athens and Piraeus. It's a very common, widespread problem across the Athens metro. I wanted to make a quick point here about green energy, a transition that so many countries are currently undergoing for a number of reasons. Our leaderships, they would like to expedite the fourth industrial revolution as much as possible and as quickly as possible. Last year, Greece hit a record high in green energy output, an astonishing achievement. But let's get real, just because the country expedites the fourth industrial revolution does not mean the locals are having a great time living in Athens. While the entire country of Greece focuses on renewable energy, the basic necessities of the Greek people are often not met. I want to make a bit of a positive note here. If you've ever come to Greece, you have no doubts in your mind that Greece is a fabulous country filled with an ancient culture that so many of us would like to experience just once in our lifetime. The crumbling infrastructure, the ultra-high cost of living, the low median salaries, and all kinds of other local issues really create divides between the people of Greece. Let's talk about Austria, my native country, where I was born and raised. I wanted to touch on a few very important points that I've personally spotted during my past trips to Vienna, Austria. Vienna is a city that's long been admired for its stunning architecture and imperial history. The country of cultural heritage is undergoing a dramatic transformation in 2024. But let's get real, the changes aren't all about transformation and progress. Given the current population statistic that I've personally researched, Vienna, Austria is now an ethnic minority city. It is not the only ethnic minority city in the European Union. In fact, there are many more to mention, and the same can also be said about the United Kingdom. In the current times that we're living in, Vienna's current demographic makeup reflects the high migration the city and also the country of Austria has seen over the past 10 to 15 years. Now you might think, hey, Vienna, Austria is embracing all this mass migration, so good things must be happening when we're talking about birth rates, fertility rates, marriages being formed. That does not hold true. The fact is that birth rates in Vienna, Austria have been steadily declining over the past years. And again, I want to make this powerful statement that Vienna, Austria is not some rare exception in the European Union. If you take a look at the neighboring countries, the southern European Union countries, in fact the entire European Union, you will spot the exact same patterns. Fewer children are being born while the number of deaths rises annually. It is a troubling demographic shift that is happening not just in Vienna, but across whole Austria. And like I said, even in the capital, Vienna, fertility rates are steadily declining. What about marriages in Vienna, Austria? Well, basically, marriage is becoming less prominent, less common in Austria. Divorces have been declining, which is definitely a good thing, but it is not because people are living together happier than ever before. No, it is because fewer marriages are being formed than ever before. So like I said, it's not because marriages are better than ever or are lasting longer. No, it is because fewer marriages are being formed. On one of my recent trips to Vienna, Austria, I personally experienced how things have changed in the capital of Austria. I remember at the apartment I stayed, where I had to make a noise complaint against a neighbor who threw a party late at night. To my surprise, the police took a very long time to respond. They almost didn't take my request seriously, and I had to call them again to ask what is going on, and it took them a long time to show up at our building, and by the time they showed up, the party was already over. So this experience with the police in Vienna, Austria clearly demonstrated that maybe Vienna's police has bigger, more troublesome things to worry about and solve, and that something insignificantly sounding like a loud party during the quiet hours is ignored, which was definitely not the case when I grew up in Austria, where such requests were taken a lot more seriously than today. Oftentimes we cannot see the changes if we've been gone for a very long time, or if we've lived in the same place continuously throughout our whole life. But truly, if we leave the place and return annually, we can see the incremental changes that have been happening. Garbage disposal violations are happening more frequently than ever before, which came in as a complete surprise to me. Many of Vienna's new residents simply don't have the same environmental awareness as the locals. And let's get real, environmental awareness has long been the cornerstone of Austrian society. The lack of surveillance means that many of these crimes go unpunished. The streets are dirtier than ever before. I took a walk down Vienna's most popular and prominent shopping street, Maria-Hilfer-Straße, and I was surprised and shocked by how the street looked like. It didn't resemble anything that I had in my imagination. It was a completely different experience altogether. Maria-Hilfer-Straße is no longer what it used to be. The energy and excitement that once defined this very street are gone. I wanted to make another quick note here about taxes, which is something that so many of our followers are interested in optimizing every single year. Let's get real again. Starting and running a successful business in Vienna, Austria is becoming increasingly more difficult due to the crazy high tax rates imposed by the local authorities. The Austrian authorities take a staggering 55% of your profits. You heard me right, more than half of your hard-earned money is gone. You never see it. Of course, Austria applies progressive tax rates, meaning the 55% income tax would only apply to people that reach the highest income threshold. The European Union has something called the VAT, the value-added tax, which indicates that you're going to have to pay 20% tax on a lot of the product purchased on a daily basis. And needless to say, the 20% added tax makes life even more difficult and more unaffordable for average EU citizens, including the citizens of Austria. The tax burden is choking the life out of everyday entrepreneurs living in Austria. And I've said this many times throughout our videos, it is no wonder why so many Austrian entrepreneurs relocate to a different geographic location where lower income tax rates are an option. Thousands and thousands and thousands of Austrians have relocated to the United States of America simply for a better life. People are fleeing the high tax rates, hoping to find more freedom and also a higher quality of life abroad. Who can blame them? And it is true that in countries like Austria, it feels like your success is being punished, not rewarded. Two very different things. There's no doubt in my mind that Vienna is a city in transition, struggling with so many of the modern day's challenges. The beauty and the grandeur of Austria's history are undeniable. These aspects are still present in Vienna today. But let's get real, beneath the surface, cracks are starting to show. Whether it's the environmental neglect, the shifting demographics in Austria, or simply the ultra-high taxes that so many people are struggling to pay, Austria is a country that needs to see changes very soon. Next, let's talk about Spain, a country that is undergoing drastic demographic shifts that have been ongoing for decades. In recent decades, wokeness has taken root in Spain. The growing influence of wokeness has led to a broader identity crisis where the Spain we once knew is slowly fading away. Nowhere is it more prevalent than in Andalusia, where a good chunk of all newly registered residents are of foreign origin. Those of you who have previously vacationed in the beautiful southern region of Spain, Andalusia, are aware of the fantastic lifestyle experience that you get while you are there. There are very few places on the Mediterranean that feel as positive and where the ambiance is as fantastic as in Andalusia. There are very few places like it on the Mediterranean. On top of that, southern Spain also provides one of the best infrastructures in southern Europe. But let's get real. The region's character is shifting as cultures blend. This creates a sense of identity loss where the culture of Spain you once knew is slowly fading. I wanted to make a note here about renting apartments in Spain, a task that has become close to impossible for foreign expats seeking a new life in Spain. For middle-class expats, finding an apartment in Spain has become nearly impossible. The once easy process of renting an apartment in Spain has transformed, possibly forever. Due to Spain's pro-tenant laws, a lot of landlords take extra and often unnecessary precautions before renting an apartment out to a foreigner. Landlords have tightened up their policies, making renting an apartment in Spain very problematic and often impossible for average people, including European Union citizens. I remember back in 2008 when I was renting an apartment in Spain, it was a much simpler process. No background checks, no income verification, no asking tons of questions. It was such an easy and straightforward process that really anyone could have completed. But fast forward to today, renting an apartment in Spain has become very unpleasant for average people. Back then, and like I said, it was 2008, the deal was sealed with a handshake. That was it. But fast forward to today, it's a very different story. Due to Spain's pro-tenant laws, landlords have become a lot more difficult to deal with. Landlords have become much more selective, and they have good reasons to be skeptical if the local authorities don't protect landlords against unlawful tenants, then who will do it? Now landlords are asking for full upfront payments for the entire lease length, often asking for as much as 9 to 12 months upfront. Imagine this, it is very difficult to rent an apartment unless you have a lot of savings. It's just very hard to do. On top of that, a lot of landlords also ask for 2 to 3 months deposit. And if that's not enough, they require proof of income, salary slips, bank statements, you name it. And often, even if you prove all the information your landlord requests from you, your application may still be denied. Like I've said, for many middle-class expats, such demands are completely out of reach. What used to be an affordable and welcoming housing market is now a never-ending nightmare for average people looking to live and work in Spain. The horrendous obstacles and financial barriers that are put in place by landlords make it very difficult to settle down in Spain. However, it is possible to find a landlord that will not ask you for a lot of money up front. I'm in the process of selling my apartment in Tenerife, Spain, but it is not without its challenges. The mass influx of migrants, along with protests against foreign property ownership, make it difficult to get a reasonable price for your apartment. We all know that supply and demand drives apartment prices more than anything. Given the current situation Spain is undergoing, more specifically the Canary Islands, it may be difficult to make a profit on this very deal. Now, if all this information that I've shared with you does not convince you that the European Union may be undergoing some challenging times, I want you to consider the following. Division is growing among EU member state presidents. If you have followed the news recently, you have seen growing divide within the EU Parliament, and it is much more prevalent than ever before. Poland and Hungary in particular are opposing many of the policies that are put in place by the EU's leadership. Many countries, including Poland and Hungary, feel like many of the EU's policies are forced onto them. From judicial reforms to immigration policies, many leaders of EU countries are not satisfied with the actions that are being put in place. One of the founding principles of the European Union is the free movement of people, goods, and services. In theory, it's a seamless experience moving from Greece to Austria. We all know it. However, the EU also comes with its cons. But when it comes to the legal systems of these nations, they're just not as aligned as they seem. While the overreaching framework is supposed to be the same, many governments of EU countries just make laws that they seem fit for their countries. What is legal in one country might be treated very differently in another. One of the biggest issues plaguing the European Union right now is the growing divide and the lack of consistency in laws that should all be placed under the European Union umbrella. Now that we've talked about everything that's wrong with the European Union, what can you do? What should you do? In life, we have options. Life is all about choices. You decide what you want to do with your life. Nobody can make that choice for you. You have two distinct options. You stay where you're at and you fight for what belongs to you, and you fight for what you believe to be right. And of course, we're talking about peaceful protesting. We're not talking about anything else in this video. This is one option. You stay where you're at and be happy with what you've got, because it's not going to get any better a lot of the times. And countries are in transitions all the time, and the European Union is no exception. Option 2 is to move to a country where you are just more in alignment, where the country is more in alignment with your values and your identity. This is a decision you have to make for yourself. You have to decide what country you want to relocate to, which of course requires extensive research, unless you work with a professional relocation agency like Nomad Elite that helps you to identify options that suit your needs. If you have some kind of online business, if you're an internet entrepreneur or some kind of digital professional who can work from anywhere, anytime, you might want to consider relocating to the following countries. Paraguay is a country where you may not have to pay taxes on your foreign sourced income at all. Most foreign sourced income is excluded from taxation in Paraguay, assuming that you are a legal tax resident of Paraguay and that you meet all the other requirements. And when you generate income locally in Paraguay, you're going to be paying less than 10% in taxes, or up to 10% in taxes. This is important. Now, another important point is that Paraguay offers one of the easiest residence permits in the entire world. To make matters even better, Paraguay does not require economic solvency proof to qualify for temporary residency. Temporary residency in Paraguay is valid for 2 years, and before the 2 years are up, you may convert to permanent residency, assuming you meet all the requirements that are being put in place by the Paraguayan authorities. Paraguay allows its residents to own property in the country. You can own all types of real estate, including residential real estate, commercial real estate, farmland, you name it. Paraguay also offers a path to citizenship to those who met all the permanent residency requirements and requirements set by the courts of Paraguay. If you are a hotshot European Union entrepreneur, you may want to consider relocating to Panama, where you could live in a very business-oriented environment, enjoying warm weather throughout the year, hospitable locals, and close proximity to the United States of America, which is something that is very important to many EU citizens who do business in the United States. Unlike Paraguay, where you don't have to prove economic solvency or incorporate a business to get residency, Panama requires you to incorporate a Panamanian corporation to qualify for Panamanian residency. The good part is that once you become a legal resident of Panama, you can fully operate your business inside Panama, so we're not talking about an offshore company, and the tax situation in Panama is also quite favorable. Panama does have a coastline, Paraguay doesn't. So if the coastline is important to you, then Panama is likely the better option. Let's be realistic. Incorporating a Panamanian corporation, applying for Panamanian residency is a process that you can complete in a few weeks' time. However, it will take several months for the Panamanian authorities to approve your residency. In fact, it can take up to 6 months. So it is very important that you plan ahead of time and accordingly. If you're tired of the never-ending restrictions of the European Union or are just unhappy with the trajectory of the EU, you might want to consider relocating to Malaysia, a country located in Southeast Asia, where you can obtain several visas that would allow you to live in the country on a permanent basis. The Malaysia My Second Home program has long been one of Southeast Asia's most sought after residency programs in the entire world. I want to make an important note here. Getting citizenship in Malaysia will be close to impossible. However, certain options, visa options in Malaysia, are almost the equivalent of a residence permit, because you can buy property, even though property ownership is restricted in a sense that you may only be allowed to buy property valued above a certain threshold, a certain price. However, Malaysia does allow foreign land ownership, which is not typical across the region, and so we're talking Southeast Asia. To the entrepreneurs out there, you may want to consider getting the Malaysia Tech Entrepreneur Program, a visa that would allow you to live in Malaysia for many years and legally operate an innovative business in the country. What I personally like about the Malaysia Tech Entrepreneur Program is that the requirements are actually quite feasible for normal average people. So you don't have to deposit hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the tech entrepreneur visa, but you are required to prove savings of about 50,000 ringgit, which is anywhere from 10 to 13,000 euros, which is very, very doable. And like I've said, with this visa, you can legally work for this business, for your business in Malaysia, and you can legally live in Malaysia. Malaysia is a very diverse country. There are two distinct parts. East Malaysia, that's where we have Kuching, and also West Malaysia, that's where we have Penang, Kuala Lumpur, and Johor Bahru. What is your take on the current situation of the European Union? Do you believe the European Union will eventually recover, or do you believe it's too late to initiate change? If you're interested in obtaining a residence permit in one of the countries that we discussed in today's video, please reach out to us. You should see our website displayed right on the screen. There should also be a link below the video. Thank you so much for watching Nomad Elite. We truly appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to helping you relocate to one of the countries that we just discussed. We see you on the next video.